Hello, I'm David Hunt and welcome to my little segment here on Bent TV. My guest today, he is so important that I had to curtsy when he came to the door. I'm sorry about that, people, but this is the sort of tension I'm under with this person. No, he's the nicest person you could ever imagine. He's an actor, he's a director, a producer, a teacher. I've worked with some of the biggest names and still does work with some of the biggest names in the country, mostly in the musical theatre realm, but not totally. He has a fetish, I'm going to tell you, it's Stephen Sondheim. Yeah, his fetish was Stephen Sondheim, and he loves doing production. We'll get onto that a little bit later. Oh, this is his day job, and apart from all the other day jobs he has, he heads head of musical theatre at the Victorian College of the Arts, which is part of Melbourne Uni. So let's meet him because we've got so much to talk about. Tyran Parke, hello.
Hello, David. So nice to be here. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
No, my pleasure. And the fact is, I've tried to get you on multiple times, but you're so hard to pin down because you're in New York or you're here or you've got this production on and you're like a busy boy.
It's funny because it doesn't occur like that. But when you think about it, we have tried to do this a few times and that has been the reason why, I guess. So yeah, but I'm so delighted it finally happened.
Now, let's start off, as I always do, your background. Are you a Melbourne lad? Where are you from?
No, I've only been in Melbourne for not even 10 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm from Newcastle.
Right.
So I grew up in Newcastle in the 80s in like real cold Newcastle time,
yeah.
You know. But Newcastle's one of those cities that inside of that had a real thriving arts.
Yes, I'm very aware of it. Yeah. A lot of people came out of Newcastle. Yeah.
I've often thought about that, about why, like what was that little...
And what, have you been able to work it out?
Look, I think it possibly is, you know, now that I work so much in Launceston, we'll probably talk about that, but there's a similar echo of something there, that in amongst that kind of the Newcastle that I'm thinking of, where I grew up, whether this is true or not, from a young person's point of view, it was really sort of working class. It was run by BHP. And I didn't fit into, like I couldn't see my future there. And so then there was a little, like so many people, there was a little world where I found my tribe, which was the theatre. And so I guess it's probably a response to that potentially. And then there were theatres, so that you need, and there were theatres for young people. So yeah, I'm always amazed at how many people have gone on out of Newcastle and continue to work in our industry.
So when did it come? Was it still when you were a young lad, you know, like the interest in music and theatre?
Well, I went, you may not believe this, but I was sent to drama school, like to acting class in Newcastle, because I was so unbelievably shy. And I still am.
That is often the case with performers.
It did the thing that my parents wanted it to do, which was like they were thinking, well, you know, how are you going to have a job interview? How are you going to, like, how do we bring you out of yourself? And so it's part of the reason why I love teaching theatre, is that because I always think, of all the people that I teach, they're not necessarily going to be Hugh Jackman, but the skills that you get out of theatre, the kind of the ability to communicate, to empathise, to see things from different points of views, or collaborate, all those things are so good in life. So I guess my parents knew that, but that wasn't what really did it. Like I went because that was the idea and it was fun. But I don't know if you know this, but and I say that because I've talked about it a few times, and it feels central to why I work in the arts. But my mother passed away very suddenly when I was 9.
Oh.
Yeah, and so she had an asthma attack. So the experience of having your mother and then losing her in that same world that I talked about of Newcastle, and my father, my amazing father, he did the thing that he thought you do, the right thing to do, which now, of course, we kind of judge and look at, but, you know, it was a different time. But he took down all the photos of my mother. Oh. He sort of went, okay, we're now going to move on. We're going to have
how did you cope with that?
Not well.
No.
Not well, but I think what happened was we the gap in our lives, the space where my mother was, and the absence of her, which was never filled with any, like she was never discussed again.
Wow.
What happened was my brother picked up her camera. She was a photographer, and he started to take photos.
Whoa.
Yeah, and now
And
he's like one of our best photographers ever.
What's his name?
Tyran Parke.
Right, okay.
And then my younger brother started to draw, and he's an artist, a visual artist based in Adelaide. And I did that thing that often happens with music theatre where I found the experience of songs to share the thing that I wasn't sharing in my life. So even that was like, okay, great. I was in the arts. We all went into the arts at that point, my brothers and I.
And how did your father cope with that? What did he do as a job?
He worked, he had many jobs in his life. He worked at Ganninans, which was part of like the tube makers, like making trains. He worked as a stationery guy. He ran his own squash court at one point.
Oh, okay.
He did loads of things.
So he was comfortable with you guys all in the arts?
Yeah, loved it.
Right.
Had no problem at all. Like,
right.
Just went,
Fantastic.
whatever you want to do.
Yep.
Whatever you want to do.
Yep.
And he is since that whole experience of how to cope with my mother's passing, he's since sort of apologized for without needing to. But I think I often hear of people in the arts who have, if ever I'm on a bus in regional Victoria and we're doing a tour of something, I never go, what did you see on Netflix? I always go, why are you here? What happened? And often it's something around 9 or 10.
Yeah.
But the really big thing was my dad, I think, not knowing how to connect with me at that age when he likes theatre. I'm going to take him to the theatre. And he looked up, there was a place called the Young People's Theatre in Newcastle, still there, corner of Lindsay and Lawson Street. And I had done a pantomime there. I'd been in The Wizard of Oz. I wasn't very good, but I was in it. And he went, I'll take him to a play. And then he loves that. And that's how I'll connect with him. I was 9.
Yeah.
He took me to a play called The Children's Hour. Do you know that play?
No.
Have you heard of that? It's a Lillian Hellman play. It sounds like the play you take a young child to connect with. The Young People's Theatre presents The Children's Hour. You think, oh, it's some lovely pantomime. David, it is the most inappropriate play to take a grieving 9-year-old to. It is like, it's not what you're supposed to, it's not where you're supposed to be. I remember walking in, like these are my memories as a 9-year-old and going, where are all the kids? It's a play set in the 50s in a boarding school that these 2 women run the boarding school, and one of the students spreads a rumor that they're in a sexual relationship, these 2 women. It's heavy. And I remember sitting there going, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be here. And this thing that was supposed to connect us was more awkward than ever.
Yeah. And
there are 2 things I remember, David. One is silly. I remember at interval that my dad bought me a cherry ripe. And it felt like an adult chocolate. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, because of the dark chocolate, I suppose.
Yeah, like as a kid you had Smarties like I had a cherry ripe. So I thought, maybe we're here because like I'm an adult now. Maybe
at 9.
Maybe like my dad and I, like maybe this is the new relationship. And I remember it being excruciatingly difficult to realize what the play was about and it to continue and me to think, I think my dad thought we were going to have a laugh and go home and talk about it. At the very end of the play, it's a tragedy. The woman playing the lead woman, who also happened to be the principal of my school, goes off stage and you hear a gunshot. I'm 9, in like my dad, like excruciating, just going, I should not be here. But there is a moment, David, I always get a bit emotional about this. There's a moment that happened where it was set in this boarding school and there were these bay windows all around the sides and the woman left on stage was there. And I was the whole time thinking I shouldn't be here. But in that moment, it started to rain in the theatre. And there was a moment for me where I just went, oh my God, it's raining in the theatre. And I kind of left my experience of what that was and my father and no mother and cherry ripe and, and it kind of became bigger. A minute later, all the people came out and it was Newcastle in the 80s. It was like they had hoses and it was like they were all wet from, like it was real basic community theatre.
Yeah.
And yet it kind of took me somewhere else. And I think that was the moment. And I've told a few people that, and there's a beautiful actor called Rowan Witt who was in Follies. I directed Follies a few years ago. And I remember saying, I was working with Deborah Byrne, and we're doing that amazing song, I'm Still Here.
Yeah.
And I was late, and I hate being late. And I said to them, I'm so sorry, I just need to finish this song. And Deborah did it again, and she was Deborah Byrne. It was extraordinary. And then I said, so sorry, everyone, let's set up. And Rowan came to me and said, oh, sorry about that. We're about to get onto your scene. And he went, that's okay. You just made it rain in the theatre. And I've always thought, it was such a beautiful, he knew the story. And so that's kind of the origin story in a way.
When did you come out to your father?
I came out to my dad and my stepmum. Well, I sort of came out to them not even quite knowing what it was, and they didn't know how to handle it. They sort of, they did the best they could. It was before I went to WAPA, so I would have been 20. And partly that was because I was with my girlfriend at the time,
right.
And she was planning on moving to Perth, and I thought, this is not going to go, like, we need to manage this before that happens. But there's also a great story about WAPA, so the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts. There's a fountain there, a water fountain, and we used to call it the turning fountain because of the alarming amount of young men that went in straight and drank from the fountain and came out in many ways. In many ways.
Hey, it's obvious in musical theatre course, enough said. So you obviously went over there and studied there. What was that like? Leaving Newcastle, and you were obviously doing a theatre and stuff there, but doing a course, the famous course in Perth.
Yeah.
What was it like?
It was incredible. It was incredible because my little pocket that I'd found in Newcastle, in Perth, that was all Perth was. I couldn't tell you about most of Perth. It meant Perth was WAPA. That's what we went for. It was a particular time where it was really cheap. So it's not like now where we didn't have to work very much. We were completely consumed by theatre and by stories, and it was amazing. And I had tried for several years to get there.
Right.
So I had gone and auditioned and not got in, and I'd gone and auditioned and not got in. And the head of the course at that time, John Milson, knew that he wanted me to come. I started auditioning when I was 17. And he was right. Like when I went there, it was sort of the right time.
Yeah.
I always think of drama school, it's not just you go, it's like any university course, I guess. You go, but particularly drama school, you start to understand your identity because you can't tell stories until you kind of know who you are.
A bit of experience in life,
So it was quite perfect.
Yeah.
It was quite a wonderful experience, and it was isolated and away.
Yeah.
And then it was far enough away that my parents couldn't drop in.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. I loved it.
And what did you do after that? Where did you go back to Newcastle? Or?
Well, no, because there was no sort of, if you were going to be in music theatre, I knew it was going to be Sydney or Melbourne, and so I moved to Sydney, and then I did musicals. Like, the first thing I did was down here. Actually, it was the production company.
Oh. The wonderful
production
God,
company.
I still miss the production company.
Don't we all?
Now, just explain to the viewers what the production company is.
The production company was a company that was here for 21 years and presented 3 musicals a year in concert at the State Theatre or sort of in the Arts Centre Victoria. And it grew over the time. I was in their first year and several other seasons, and they would get a significant performer and a show that potentially wasn't going to have a commercial run and present it for a week.
Yep, just 1 week as well.
Week.
And the fact is, it was a lot of the big time musicals back in the day when they weren't coming to Australia.
Yeah.
So therefore it was a great opportunity for the audience, but more so for the actors to be in a wonderful, famous show.
Yeah. And also it was for performers, like for the, so yes, it was, like if I think of the first year, it was Mame, She Loves Me, and Funny Girl.
Whoa.
And we haven't seen any of those 3 in professional productions. So it's not like they took them out of the market. They actually kept them alive.
Yep.
And for younger performers like myself, it was an inroad. So Guy Simpson was the musical director, and Gary Young was the director, and they were the directors of the big shows. And you could be in these shows and sort of have an extended audition, if you like. And I did Funny Girl with Caroline O'Connor.
Yep.
And I had, it's famous, it starts and it's Caroline O'Connor. It's, hello, gorgeous, And then I had the next lines. And I reckon I did every exercise I had learnt at WAPA for 3 years, I did that morning to get ready to go.
Whoa.
5 minutes, Miss Bryce, or whatever I said. But that was all I said. But I thought, I've got to do everything. And of course, it was the first moment of the show.
And you're still connected with her?
And we've done more shows than anyone else. And I directed her one woman show. And we've worked together ever since. So it's amazing. It's a beautiful connection.
Brilliant. So what brought you to Melbourne? Or it's obvious in a way.
Well, it is and it isn't, because who wouldn't be here? But also, the thing that really brought me to Melbourne was I was having a pretty wonderful life in Sydney, but I don't know if you ever have this where you go, I am inquisitive by nature. Like I'm always wondering what the other choice might be. And I think there was a moment in Sydney where I was aware that life was going well, but I could kind of see how it was going to play out. I kind of went, I can see what that looks like. I'll probably, do one show a year at the Hayes Theatre, or I'll work at night, or I'll do and I just thought, I wonder what happens if I make myself more uncomfortable. And that's why I moved here.
Oh,
and
a new challenge.
Yeah. And I moved here. I had 4 hours a week at the VCA.
Yeah.
By the end of the first week, I had 21 hours. By the end of that year, I had a full-time job as a lecturer at the VCA. Not necessarily something I ever wanted, but I thought, I sort of say yes.
Yeah.
And then within 6 months, I was head of department.
Whoa.
So it was insane.
That is extraordinary.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing it now?
I think this is my 8th year.
Wow. And still loving it?
I love it.
And what I love is that you actually take students somewhere in the world to experience being part of another world culture within theatre.
Yeah. We're incredibly, I'm really proud of the course. I'm really proud of it. We have...
Oh, what is the course, by the way?
So it's the Victorian College of the Arts, which is inside of Melbourne University, and it's their Bachelor of Fine Arts in Music Theatre.
Yep.
There are things to be proud of that seem really obvious. So the university's really proud of the metrics. Last year's graduating showcase, we had 22 people, and I think 14 of them were in professional musicals already. So the university loves that.
Mm.
I am proud of things in a different way. Because I work in the industry, and because I kept thinking, who do I want to work with? Like, who's coming through? And we know, like, there's a generational gap between me and my students. Like, there's 20, 30 years between us. I love finding out what their struggles are, and I love what I call, so I don't call it triple threats, I call it triple celebrations, right? Okay. Because I go, how can you be threatened by someone's talent? Like, that is so, like, anti what I think theatre should be.
I wonder where it came from.
Broadway, I'm sure.
Broadway?
I'm sure.
It wasn't Shakespeare said it? It might have been,
Might have been. It's an interesting idea, isn't it? To be threatened because someone has that talent, and that talent. So I call them triple celebrations. But the fourth one is really about, because young people have so much anxiety. Like, there is a thing, the anxiety generation, that's what they're called. They deal with social media, they deal with climate change, all these things that I didn't have to deal with, that make it hard to be brave, to fail, and that is inherent to being an actor. And so one of the things I'm very proud of with the VCA is, yes, they work, but it's about how we help them understand their identity and why stories are important. And part of that is we go to London, which is what you're referring to, which is, a lovely, cherry on the top of the cake. Was, I take the third years to London every year, and they immerse themselves in the theatre, in the practitioners, insane teachers like Audra McDonald, and like just Tamsin Carroll came in, Elaine Page, like crazy people, and what a gift, what an extraordinary, and they're all young. A lot of them have never been overseas, so to be with them when they're having that level of... Wow.
And the buzz you must get from it, and I can sense it. But the fact is that you just don't do that. You produce or direct so many other
Yeah.
productions. Yeah, it's crazy. But you're right in the middle now of something down in Tasmania. What is it?
The Australian Musical Theatre Festival. Yeah, and it's this.
And you bring all performers from around Australia down to Tassie.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary thing. So that person growing up, this relates to what we're saying, that person growing up in Newcastle in an isolated bubble, and there's the BHP world around me, for 1 week a year, I take over a city. The dominant culture of a city is musical theatre. Like, that's incredible to me. Like, that 9-year-old, that's...
Wow. Yep.
And so
yep.
the festival was something, to be honest, that I never...
How did it come up?
Yeah. It was so obviously one of the if you think about me being at the university for 8 years, aside from the first year, COVID happened. Like a lot of it was just like managing. How do you teach singing, acting, and dancing in people's homes? The most locked down city in the world, like all of that. And in amongst it, I had gone and taught at the Musical Theatre Festival. There'd been one before I joined it, and I fell in love with Launceston. It reminded me a bit of Newcastle.
Okay, same size, I suppose.
Something similar.
Yeah.
I feel like, Australia that I grew up with was more connected to England, and now Australia is more connected to America, for better and worse. And something in Launceston reminded me of Newcastle of my childhood. There was something there. Yep. But I was helping them out because they needed an industry board to assist, and the job came up.
Of course it did.
I never intended. I kind of was like, I put my hat in the ring and I went to the interview, and there were these 3 incredible women, and they really shifted it for me. And it came at a time, so it was during COVID, where I was like, why do we need a musical theatre festival? What is a festival of musical theatre? It's inherently a commercial art form. But during COVID, it became clear why, because there was the resurgence of Black Lives Matters and Me Too and all of these things that made us look at musicals in a different way, but there was nowhere to really experiment with that. In Launceston, I make musicals that you can't see anywhere else. So I will create them and put them in immersive settings. So last year we did a version of Sondheim's Marry Me a Little, set in the pandemic, in an abandoned hotel, and you'd walk into a room and there would be Queenie van der Zandt painting going, I remember trees. And there'd be Patrice Tapuki going, and they'd be like, and so you never get to do that here. Like, that's incredible. And Tasmania is beautiful. And Tasmania has the best air and the best wine and the best food. And all of those things link. It's a great place to have a festival. And I bring down the best people I know.
Who? Drop a few names.
So the people we've had there, have been, Todd McKenney and Simon Gleeson and Natalie O'Donnell and Paulini and Rob Mills and Gemma Ricks and Rachel Beck and like so many extraordinary people, Philip Quast. And this year we've got Caroline O'Connor, who traces back to my very first lines on a professional stage.
What was it?
5 minutes, Mrs. Bryce. It's just that. Hello, gorgeous. So she'll be there. We have Mark Vincent, who is an extraordinary singer.
Yep.
Used to be a student of mine at the Australian Institute of Music.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I directed his one-man show.
Right.
And so I was like, great, come and do that. And we have Alinta Chidsey, who was the star of Moulin Rouge, and many others. And we have the Tasmanian Symphony Orchestra. And it is wild. I think I'm directing 15 shows in 5 days.
Now, you were talking before we started the interview about how you create all this chaos for yourself. Well, let's do another show. Oh, what about that one? So it's now out of control, and it's your fault.
It's my fault. I created a monster. It is my fault. I think there's an edge that I've always liked. This is my analogy. I've always liked to experiment with just how much wasabi is enough on a piece of sushi and what is too much. And I like to really be on the line of that, right?
Okay, yeah.
So I like to go, what can you hold in a festival of musical theatre that has varying requirements And what is too much. And there have been times where I have to acknowledge I've done too much. Last year, I lost my, who I was hoping to be the leading man in 9. So aside from directing 15 shows, I was the lead in 9, learning an Italian accent, singing that show, holding that show together while directing it. That was probably a little too much wasabi on the sushi, but I've got a great team and it works, and it's of such interest to me because he's never the same. There's nothing you can see there that has been done before. It's always like, I'm currently doing a version of Working, which is a Stephen Schwartz musical. And he has allowed me to go and interview Tasmanian people about what their life is like, what their relationship to work is, what they want as a legacy. And I've interviewed them and put them next to songs by him, Lin-Manuel Miranda, James Taylor, all these people. And it's the kind of musical that I can do because everyone's in a monologue. So Caroline's doing her showstopper moment, but it's just contained in that. Johanna Allen, who just had a huge success with Victorian Opera's Sweeney Todd, is doing her moment. And as long as I know how it fits together, I kind of pull it together. So you can do musicals like that, and it'll never be seen for 2 nights and that's it. It's crazy.
The one thing that I talk a lot with, especially theatre, is that so much time and effort goes into putting on a show, and it's over and done with, and it doesn't tour. And I feel sorry for all the hard work that goes in. That 2 nights, and then it's gone. Although whatever. How do you feel about that? Or do you just think it's the way it is and you just got to move on?
I love it and hate it. I'm very mixed about it. It's part of the reason I'm very busy is that I never have the day after. Hal Prince, the great theatre director, would start his next project the day after an opening night.
Yep.
And I'm so lucky and so privileged that I have an abundance of work in the world that I truly love. And the loss of it is something I couch by going to them. And in my own psychology, you look at a family with a gap in the middle of it, I bring families together and then I move to the next family and then I move to the next family. And for better and worse, I always take a breath after the festival completely. And I always have to re-engage with something about me. So I'll often, when I finished 9 was the final thing in the last year's festival. So I've done 15 shows and then done 9, including playing Guido. And there's a party and they're waiting for the artistic director to come. They'll have to wait for that. And there's a relationship I have to my mother where I thank her and I go through that moment, and I have to do that. Origin of creating something is still there. And that's what I have to acknowledge, given that everybody else falls away and there's another group of people.
Right. Wow. Just quickly on finishing, we could be speaking for the next hour.
I know.
But is there one thing that's sitting out there in the universe that is your big goal in life?
In life?
Like within your theatre world, or maybe beyond?
There is something that as you know, I mean, the reason we met is I started my own company last year, Clovelly Fox Productions, which is based on a relationship I have with a fox in Clovelly in Newcastle, in Sydney. And it became a symbol of creativity for me, this fox. I used to see it when I'd do notes or have a creative quandary and the fox would go by. So it became a kind of phrase, follow the fox. And it's the scariest thing I've ever done. So people find that interesting. People also find it interesting that I'm not very ambitious. I know you won't believe that, David.
I won't believe it, but it's not ambition that's pushing you. It's your love of what you do.
Yeah. It's part of the reason, like I've often talked about, like I have a big ego, but I'm not that ambitious. So like the world right now is kind of, it's more than I would have wished as a 9-year-old.
Yep.
It's beyond what I expected.
Is your dad still alive?
Yeah.
And what does he think of what you're doing?
Oh, he couldn't be prouder.
Brilliant.
I mean, he just is. He doesn't quite know what directing is.
Of course, yeah.
So I'll never forget when it was, I think it might have been Paddy Newton went up to my father after Follies and went, you must be so proud of him. And my dad went, he wasn't in this one. Fine, no problem.
Yeah.
But he can see that I mean something to people. But the company, for me, like why start a company when I'm so busy, there's something that I have realized over time that I do that is unique to actors. And I've started to understand that it's unique to audiences. And Elegies, which is the song cycle that we created last year, that was an experiment. And when that went so well, I went, okay, so I do absolutely have an idea of what that company might stand for. I just need to be braver. And that's my motto now, because I'm in my second act, I'm calling it, of my life.
Okay.
And the second act has no time for, the first act you have endless exposition and character development and all of that. Second act, the shit's got to get real.
Right.
And I'm in that. So there are definitely things that I go, there's something I can bring to that show that's not being done in Melbourne in theatre. And I don't want my life to be a full-time producer. But I know that everything we've talked about today, those shows that I want to do, and happily I've got the rights to them now, they do connect through VCA back through Hello Gorgeous back to that 9-year-old. And so there are particular ones, and I think that's something that I still have ahead of me.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I've learned so much about you, but I sort of would have guessed it along the way as well. But I'm sure the audience is going to love seeing this interview. So thank you.
It's such a pleasure. Like, seriously, usually you get 2 minutes on something to kind of go, here's the bite-sized thing. So it's just beautiful to be able to talk with you. Thank you.
Well, and as I said, we should have been talking even longer. Tyran Parke, thank you so much. And I'll see you again real soon. See ya.